SNC Podcast, episode 45. Yep.
You knew it, because I lost track like 8 episodes ago.
Yeah. We have Rob Cannon here from Behemoth Comics.
Yeah, I work with Behemoth, but I'm with Fubrak Studio. It's kind of a weird situation. We're an imprint for Fubrak or for Behemoth.
Oh, okay.
It's me and Kevin Rodatelli, and we are working on putting some crazy stuff together. So
yeah. So basically, what is some of that stuff?
Yeah. So I'm heading up the production side of things. So I'm doing our flagship franchise, which is called Freak Snow, and it's about a freak. It's kind of a double entendre because it's about like a global kind of ice age type thing that happens. There's a super long blizzard and everything gets covered up in snow. So that's freaky. And the only people who are able to survive it are also freaks. So, you know, it kind of has a super hilarious double meaning. But it's been a lot of fun to work with just because when you're working in that reality, you can do anything. I'm like talking to Kevin, like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? He's like, yeah, dude, whatever, man, put it all in there. And I'm like, okay, so we're talking like Yeti, Bigfoots, dinosaurs. Like, yeah, whatever. So you never know what's going to come next. But we're starting off with stuff that's pretty well grounded. And the first graphic novel that's just released called Washed in the Blood is a self-contained story about a kid who's raised in this crazy gun worshiping cult and kind of the adventure that he goes through, like kind of figuring out who he is and what his destiny is, because he's been told it all his life and he kind of has to come up with it himself. And after that, it follows a completely different character, but they're all kind of happening in the same timeline. So as all these stories kind of continue, they're going to sort of intermingle, and, you know, we're going to play around with that sort of stuff as it goes on. So, you know, it's going to be a lot of fun, at least. And people seem to be liking it so far. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like the trailer. That was
Yeah, that's awesome. I love having like all these tangential stories that kind of go like this. It's just fun, you know, following a world where, like, you know, there's a lot going on.
Well, and it's also cool because, like, Kevin kind of came up with this idea. So, like, we're kind of like doing like a producer-director thing where he comes up with the big ideas, and then I get down into the grain and really hash things out at the detail level, come back to him for like approval, and we, you know, kind of have a good back and forth thing going. And it's been working pretty well so far. And so he came up with this idea of, like, you know, basically what if it was Mad Max but in the snow? Like, and that's kind of where it all started. And because he lives up in Quebec in this backwoods town called Trois-Rivières, which gets like 12 feet of snow every year. And so he's stuck in this like icy hell world for half of the year. And so he's like, you know, what if I make a comic about my life experiences, but just add a bunch of crazy mutants and monsters and stuff like that to it. So, but the cool thing about it is that, like, we're able to just kind of take this world right now, plot the viewer into it, and sort of like tell the story or like reveal to them stuff about the world as it goes along, and just kind of like, you know, build the world as we go, sort of a thing, where there are certain things that we know as creators, but it's also like a really cool way to just sort of explore what all the crazy possibilities are for this thing.
So, like, what got you into, like, comics in general?
I always loved doing artwork and telling stories, coming up with characters, all that stuff. I mean, the stuff that really inspired me into getting into comics, like I always thought I was going to be a director or whatever. In high school, I'd make movies with my friends and that kind of thing. None of them were any good, but like I was really into the technical side of things and getting everything to look all sharp and crispy. But I realized later on, as all my actors went into the military, I was like, wait a second, I need to figure out something else to do here. And so I was stuck for a while, but I read Watchmen, and that was the first like graphic novel, comic book, or anything I'd actually read, first of all. And second of all, it was the first piece of like comic book media that I read, and I was like, oh, this can be taken seriously. And like, see, I was never into superheroes or anything like that. Just like, you know, there's a time and place for it, but it's just not for me. But Watchmen was like a very serious, you know, type of thing. And then I read Frank Miller and saw his artwork for the first time. I was like, oh, I don't have to do like industry style artwork in order to be, you know, accepted into the industry norm or whatever. So that really got me going, like, what the hell can I do here? And so I started to work with other people and blah, blah, blah. There you go, Frank Miller's Dark Knight. I started on 300, which is a fun one. Really nice artwork. And
incredible artist.
What's that?
Incredible artwork.
Yeah. Well, like Frank Miller is, his understanding of human form is pretty interesting. Like you'll see a lot of people make fun of him because some of his stuff does look kind of goofy, especially when you get into the later years. But the work he did with Lynn Varley, where she's doing the paints, it's just like it goes together so well because he's got kind of a gonzo drawing style, and the paint was just like it's so violent, you know. It perfectly captured like the tone of the story. So that kind of stuff got me thinking, and I just started kind of collaborating and working with people for years and years, and now it's finally actually becoming something kind of professional, which is really cool. So basically just kind of, you know, what a lot of people do, just kind of pick up a pencil and go like, what the hell can I do here? And follow what I want to do. And it's kind of working out. So hooray.
That is awesome. It's definitely hard to like find something you're passionate about and be able to actually, you know, do it for any extended period of time and not have to pull away from it.
Yeah, it is. And it's also a hard decision to make because some people I've talked to who like have dipped their toes into being a professional artist, they'll kind of recoil from it because they realize after doing it for a couple of months, like, oh shit, this thing I used to do to relax and enjoy myself is a job now. And so it kind of becomes a grind and takes the fun out of it, which, you know, I do feel a little bit of that, but at the same time, I kind of like think back to, you know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago when I'm doing jobs that I don't like at all. And I compare that to, you know, hey, you know, it's kind of, I mean, I don't really feel like drawing today, but it's a lot better than hucking 50-pound water bottles around. So, I mean, you know, just kind of look at your context and keep that in mind. But yeah, it is really dope to be able to do something that I enjoy and make a bit of a living off of it.
My brother's a musician.
I love that book.
That book and the what is it, the follow-up, which is just chapter 2 or book 2 essentially, but Turning Pro, like that's my belief when it comes to artistry, is that if you're a real artist, you make money doing artwork. If not, you're either a hobbyist or you're doing it for, you know, self-flatuation. Like there's no reason to, you know, do it for yourself. Like the point is to share it with others. And the way that you know it gets shared is that people are paying for it. And like
that's a really interesting perspective. I've never thought of it that way before, but yeah.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
like it's yeah.
No, I totally I feel you. That's a pretty interesting perspective on it. Very hard, like American capitalist. I like it.
Well, it's like it's the whole thing where like money talks, not just because like, you know, various things, but like if I worked all day long shoveling coal in a mine and I decide to spend that money, that time I invested there on your artwork, that shows that it's actually valuable. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like you know that it's actually bringing joy to someone, or at least making them feel some form of emotion. Like, you know, that's the way I feel about it. If you're doing artwork, you should be doing it for others. Even if it's, you know, just something like, say you do it for your family or something, but like you need to be doing it for other people to really be an artist. If not, it's just a hobby.
Yeah. At that point, it's either, just like you said, just kind of self gratification, or like some kind of a meditation on the same level of like sitting in a cave for 20 years. Like, there's not a whole lot else that you can bring to the table with it if you're not sharing it. So yeah, that's a good point. Now, I do think that there is an argument to be said for, now I don't want to put words in your mouth, like I'm not insinuating that you said this, but like, I think a lot of people kind of want to do easily digested kind of mass media type work because that's what the most people will enjoy. And I've found a lot of value in doing just what I want to, like, you know, I do the artwork that I want to do. Not necessarily, it's not for me, it's not for other people, you know what I mean? But it's like somewhere in between where it's a little bit of both. And when I do a public event and people walk by, not everybody like comes by and says, oh, wow, that's so amazing. But every once in a while, there'll be someone who comes in and just like stops and goes like, whoa, and they like wander around, they're really interested. Not because like I'm the best artist they've ever seen in the world, but because they're looking at something that they've never seen before. And that's the kind of thing that I'm really like, oh, now that's cool. That's something I can really cling to and be proud of, you know?
Yeah, definitely being unique doesn't, or not sticking to mainstream doesn't even mean like you're not going to be an artist that gets paid. Like there's like most of the most famous artists are the ones who figured out the rules and then broke them and did their own thing.
Exactly, but you definitely have to know the rules first. You can't just go like, I'm gonna do whatever I want, and then you just make a bunch of. You might as well smear ape feces on the wall or something. It's like totally pointless.
No, that's rule number 8 now for the new modern art.
Nice.
But no, I have a friend who's getting into photography, and that was the thing I told him. I was like, if you really want to get good at it, like you first have to learn all the rules, because if you don't know the rules, you don't know how and why you would break them. You know what I mean? Like you need to know what a perfect photo is, and then figure out how to make your photo. And it's like, you know, it's the same with any form of artwork, music, drawing, you know, any of those. Even, and I like how Stephen Pressfield mentions that even entrepreneurship is an art, like being able to build a business. So you have to know all the rules first, and then you can figure out how to change them to your style of business, your style of management, whatever it might be. But you definitely need to know how the game is played first.
Yeah, for sure. And it's almost like these things are an art, but in a way there's also a level of science to them. Like that's the rules part. I had one of my friends is a martial arts instructor. He does like broadsword or something. And he gets really irritated when people use the term martial arts, because like, no, dude, it's a martial science. There are things that work and things that don't work, you know? So it's like, yeah, you learn the science and then it becomes art when you kind of make it your own, you know? And in order to do the art, you need to know the science. That's kind of but yeah, you can't get anywhere if you don't, especially if you're talking about something more technical, like using equipment like cameras and stuff like that. It's not, when you're drawing with ink, you know, as an example, if you're just doing like brush and sumi ink or whatever, you need to know the principles and the fundaments. And then after you know that stuff, you can pretty much just go for it, you know, and, you know, learn composition, all that stuff. But when you know, you're working with, I don't know, machinery or equipment or anything like that, you really need to know your way around that stuff and kind of the technical here's and there's about the whole thing. So yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of fun to play around in. It's good to be there and like know the rules and look back and go like, man, how stupid was I when I was trying to do this stuff before then? You know, you can kind of go look back at what I was doing in high school and go like, Jesus Christ, if I'd only known all those rudimentary things I was practicing in my art class were going to, you know, be that helpful, I would have paid a lot more attention and like, you know, try, you know, do the grind, do the stuff that's not fun. I think that's one of the hardest things to get any kind of artist, like you were saying, musicians, photographers, blah, 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 whatever, is to just do the boring stuff. You know, like one of my favorite working artists right now is Kim Jong-ji. I think I got his name right. He's a Korean illustrator. He has completely earned the title master in my book. And like, but one of the things he says is like, he doesn't use references, he doesn't use guides, and it's because he just draws everything. Like he'll draw your keyboard, he'll draw a pen or a, you know, just the boring crap. There he is. There's his Instagram.
I met this guy. Yeah, I met him at New York Comic Con 2018.
That's awesome.
I have a well, I haven't put away because it's wrapped, but I have the Neon Future comic by IT Comics. His cover art signed by him.
That's cool. That's dope, man.
Yeah, it looks. He's incredible. I watch. Like I'm scrolling through my feed, and I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna be busy for the next 8 minutes watching him.
yeah. It really stops you in your tracks. It's no joke. I have the same thing. He's amazing.
You're right. Like he doesn't have any references. He doesn't like he draws as if it was already planned out. Like it's like it's like he's already like almost and then then I got to go do this, and then like he just keeps going. Like it's
and incredibly complex compositions too. It's like it's crazy.
I think the coolest one I saw recently was just like he had this like trail that was wrapping around the back of everything, but he had already drawn the hollow parts of it without the people in front of it before he drew the people, then drew them perfectly over it. I'm like, what the like holy crap. Like
that's crazy.
Yeah,
I don't really know if you can learn that. I feel like that's kind of a superpower kind of situation, but you know, you can do your damnedest and you get there just by drawing everything all the time, you know.
Yeah, there's a book called Guitar Zero by he's a neurolinguistic, I think, professor, and he talks about how like he used to go to a bunch of teachers and like try to learn guitar. and they're basically like, you're musically inept. You're never gonna learn how to play guitar. Like, you can't keep rhythm, you can't hear tones. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. And throughout the book, essentially, he figures out how to get around that, and throughout a bunch of different techniques, because one of the things that he learned that it wasn't that well studied, but the few studies he did have, he like dove deep into. And essentially, like, the way your brain works is that there's a bunch of tools in your brain, like a hammer, you know, a saw, a wrench, and you use them for different things. But the tools that you use for speaking, for language, are the exact same tools used for music. And the interesting thing is, like, they have studies where, like, someone was, you know, musically gifted, got hit by lightning, and lost their ability to play music, like play any instruments. Like, they couldn't do anything. Then there was other people that had the exact opposite, where they were hit by lightning, they could play music beautifully, but they couldn't speak anymore, right? And they had more than one. Like, this has happened enough times that that this has been studied, which is crazy.
That's
to
pretty
think
weird.
that, you know, they had before and afters of people getting hit by lightning, essentially. But basically, that's one of the things he talks about, is that you might not become Jimi Hendrix, but you can definitely become amazing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people don't realize, like, the top 5% of a skill is much more attainable than you think. It's the 1% that's super, super hard to get. A lot of them are like genetically gifted. They have that one little piece of, like, Jimi Hendrix, like, or like he talked about how some people, like, they never learn their bars, they never learn their chords, their scales, none of that, and they're just amazing. And then there's other people that are just as amazing, but they had to learn all of those things.
Yeah.
So, you know, each person learns differently. They need different tools, but yeah, like, you might not become the Kim Jung. I forgot how to say his whole name.
I think it's
Kim Jung-ji.
Kim Jung-ji. I always get the name, the order of the names.
Yeah, that's why I was making sure that's the right order. But basically, yeah,
Yeah.
you might not be able to get to his skill level, but you could definitely get close enough that you'll be satisfied with where you get. But there's that concept, that dip you have to get through. And that's what I mean by, like, a real artist. Like, you're a real artist when you're okay with doing the hard, unenjoyable stuff, because you know the outcome is worth it.
That's when you're really being tested. Like, that's, in my opinion, the difference between a professional and a hobbyist or a casual, is when, you know, you have to draw, I don't know, something tedious in like, especially in a comic panel where you have to draw a crowd or something. You go like, yeah, I really don't want to do that. I think I'm just going to put that off, you know? And then you end up just not doing it like that. Whereas if this is something you know you need to do, you're going to go like, all right, this sucks, but I'm going to do it. And you might even find, like, you'll learn something, or you'll, like, find a way to enjoy it or something like that. You know, you get into it in a certain way. It happens when you're not expecting it sometimes, but, you know, in my opinion, that's what separates the casuals from the professionals.
Men from the boys, yeah.
Yes, the men from the boys.
Yeah.
And that's
definitely true.
The thing you were saying about, like, talent and skill is really interesting too, because, like, there are people who are born with talent, obviously, and they don't even have to work that hard, and they're just, like, masters. But there are also people who see those people, or who see, you know, people who just work super hard and just go, you know what? I'm like, this isn't coming to me naturally, but I'm so inspired by this that they just feel the drive to blunt force learn that thing. And in a way, like, to me, that's more respectable as, like, a character trait, you know? If you're talking about the quality of a person, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's the person that I want, you know, I don't know, in some, you know, situation where I'm relying on them. That's the type of person that I want to, you know, hang with. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, to go through that and to put that amount of work into something where you're not seeing results for a long time, that takes a lot of discipline, dedication, and going through rough times, you know, so it's pretty interesting. And there are also people born with talent that don't use it. Like, I could name a few people right now, and I'm just like, man, they kind of just squandered their raw talent and are doing other things. So, yeah, it's just a crazy world.
Even if you're born talented, you'll never be Jimi Hendrix unless you also still practice. Well, like,
right, for sure.
Point is that, like, you know, some people get a head start, and then some people are so determined that they run past the people that, you know, they're, like, leaning on their talent, right?
Yeah.
That's why, like, there's so many NBA players, football players, you know, NFL players, like, they get into the league and they're like the one that they're like, oh my God, they're going to be the greatest ever. And then you never hear from them after season one. And it's because,
do you think they get complacent, or
yeah,
they just like don't work that hard?
Yeah, like think about like the fact that they were just hyped up as like, oh, I'm the greatest ever, right? And then they're like, well, the greatest ever doesn't need to practice, right? Like,
yeah.
Which is crazy.
I'm above that.
yeah, which is crazy to think, because if anything, it should be like the greatest ever practices 4 times as hard.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And they say that about telling like kids who are the best in their class, like in elementary school and stuff like that. Or you hear stories all the time about people who like reach the top of their, you know, good times in high school, you know, the football star or whatever, whoever they are, whether they're in a cool band or whatever. It's like if someone's like at in the grand scheme of things, like a pretty low skill level or whatever in their life, and you tell them that they're the best, they're the greatest, you're so smart, this and this and this, and they'll go on and be like, okay, I got this, no problem. And then they go to college and that's too challenging for them, or they get out of college and like the professional world is more than they bargained for or something like that. Like, so yeah, I think it's important to like not let people get into that headspace of, oh, you're so great, you know, constant worship. Because like it is, and it's an important balance too, because you can't just always be critiquing somebody. If they're doing good work, it's important to tell them that and, you know, to communicate that. So it's good to have support in that way. But there's also, you know, it's got to be proportional. Maybe they are the greatest ever, but they still need to work at it. So
yeah, the way I like to think about it is you should praise people for the work they put towards the achievement, not the achievement itself.
Oh yeah, I like that. Yeah,
that's like something I learned. Like if you're raising your kids, like that's how you want to do it. You want to be like, oh my God, you studied 7 hours. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't care if you got a 30% of the test. Look how hard you worked.
Like, yeah, but like the reason why that's like so powerful is it's the whole mindset of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, and the concept of there's a limit to how good I can get, and there's no limit to how good I can get. And
yeah.
That's like when someone tells you you're good, right? Then you're like, oh, I must be innately gifted at this. I don't have to work that hard, and I'll just figure it out. And then once you can't, you're like, oh, that must be where my limit is, right? And like that's a huge thing Tom Bilyeu focuses on. He's the co-founder of Quest Nutrition and Impact Theory, which one's a food company, the other's like a mindset changing, essentially, entertainment company. And yeah, that's one thing he talks about all the time is like, don't be the smartest person in the room, be the best learner.
Right. And if you're the smartest person in the room, get the hell to a different room.
well, not just that. It's like if you're the smartest and then someone's smarter than you, well, then now you're not the smartest. You've just lost your identity. But if you're a learner, like you can't lose that. A learner is always learning.
I like that. Yeah. Always. Oh, it's never bad to be a learner.
Exactly. It's like having an identity that's correlated with someone who's always getting better than someone who is the best is always more like mentally stable, and just for your ego, it's good to keep you humble and always working harder. If you're somebody like don't say you're the best, say quarterback, just say like I am an athlete. Athlete trains, they work out, they practice, right? I'm a team player. Those are things that you can't lose just because someone's better than you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to remember that like even someone like Kim Jong-gi or like Jimi Hendrix or whoever, they're, even if it looks like they're at the top of their game right now, if they are truly committed, they're still going to be learning and improving and all that stuff. So like that is, you're never maxed out. I like to think about this when I'm like thinking about where I want my life to go. Like, what would be my dream existence? And it's like, or what would be making it for me? I like to remember that you never really make it. You're always going to be working toward, it's like, because the grass is always greener on the other side thing is totally true. Like even if you move into a bigger house, after a few months, that's going to just be where you live, and you're going to feel just like you did when you were back in that smaller house. So it's like, find things to keep stimulating, whether it's new hobbies or trying to challenge yourself in different ways or whatever. Or just continuing to try and get better stuff. I don't know. That seems kind of like negative or materialist, but it's like, it's kind of the same idea to just keep growing. Yeah. Because you're never going to be satisfied. I don't think that's in humanity or like in our DNA, because that's why we're here.
Yeah, you're satisfied in progress. I said this to someone the other day. I'm like, the only two things you need to be happy are gratitude for what you have and the striving of progress. And that's basically it. Like if you have those two things, you'll be happy. So as long as you're producing something, as long as you're creating something, and you're grateful for what you already have, that's all you need to be happy. Like you could be broke on the street as long as you're creating something and you're grateful for what you do have. That's all you need.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can be broke on the street, and that's like a terrible situation to be in, but if you have the feeling that you're getting somewhere, you know, I've never been in that situation, unfortunately, but I can only imagine that's got to be a really uplifting thing to be like, you know, someday it is possible that I'm not going to be broke on the street, that kind of thing. Or like, you know, someone who aspires to ascend in their like financial class, you know, it can happen. And if they feel, it's like the difference between, working really hard and starting your own business or whatever and kind of scraping by in the beginning, but feeling that there's growth happening versus being stuck at a dead-end job where you're kind of making ends meet, but you're not really going anywhere because it's a dead-end job with no chance of like promotion or anything.
That's what happened to this guy. I was working at a job where I was like, there was no mobility.
Yeah.
I don't work there anymore. I make way less and I'm way happier.
Dude, I think that is everyone's story who's doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, I was making quite a bit more money before I like quit everything and started doing this, but God, I'm so much happier, you know, and it's because I'm working for myself. I'm just all of it. And I think a lot of people in this industry who are working the way we are independently kind of relate to.
Yeah, and I was going to say the other thing you said too about, you know, you're never going to be satisfied. One of the things I always, my brother is a music producer and we have like a whole team of producers that come by. We actually just finished recording our other podcast. I'm like a part of like 6 different podcasts. But yeah, we have a podcast called MC to MC, which is like the MCs, like artist and Music City, because we're in Nashville. And basically,
right.
Yeah. And one of the things I talk about, because like a lot of artists are like, oh, I'm almost done. I'm trying to get this. And I'm like, listen, you should be able to release it as fast as possible, because if you think that this is your only chance to be like great, like this is your ticket to, you know, success, that means you plan on never getting better. And that's almost worse. Like there's no, like your next album, your next song should be way better than this one, regardless, no matter how good this one is. And so because of that, you shouldn't be hesitant on releasing it. You should be getting it out there as quick as you can without it being garbage. Like, you know what I mean? Like you need to make sure it's actually consumable, right? But outside of that, like you should be focused on getting it out there and sharing it. Like that's how some of the people that are growing right now are doing it, is that they're just reaching out to people, and they're, you know, what was it? Chance the Rapper was giving out his music for free, and he makes most of his music, or make most of his money in merchandise and concerts. You know what I mean?
That's actually, I talked to someone earlier today who talked about that too. It's funny. Not that exactly, but the same, like an analogy for that in comics is releasing like your issue, an issue of your comic digitally for free and just giving it to people. That boosts sales of physical copies, like, because it's just having that out there. And well, and the merch is also like, comic books are pretty much merchandise when you're talking at the franchise level. So it's like, it's a pretty interesting idea that kind of seems counterintuitive at first, but I don't know, for me personally, when I compare my experiences reading comic books on a phone or on a device of some kind, it's incredibly inferior to like holding the book in your hands and having that like full sensory experience. So it makes sense when you think about it. It was just kind of a funny thing to hear. I'm like, oh shit. So putting your comic book on the Pirate Bay might be a good promotional option.
I think it was Iron Maiden that did that. They literally were like, you know, I think they were getting screwed by their publisher or something like that, or their label, and they literally like leaked it. They're like, you know, we don't recommend that you use piratebay.com to buy our stuff. Like that, you definitely
our marketplace of choice.
Yeah, you definitely should not go to Pirate Bay, right? And like by doing that, they got so many true fans that like they would go to all the concerts.
Because that's a baller move. Like, come on, that's on the level of George Clooney playing the gay dog in South Park. That's just playing ball in the right way, dude. Or like Black Flag releasing they released a cassette tape that had the side B was blank, and they're like, record your favorite songs off the radio on this side of the tape. I'm like, yeah, dude, you know what people want. Like, that's amazing. So
Well,
yeah, no, that makes all the sense in the world. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's like you were saying too, like giving away your comic book free digitally. Like, yes, you paid for it up front, but if no one knows who you are, then give it away for free until like if 7 billion people know about your comic, and all of them gave you a penny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're getting $70 million. Like, like people need to realize that exposure is so much more powerful than the dollar that you're looking for now. And especially if you're the artist and you're not paying an artist. Like if you're the one drawing it yourself, yeah, you should want to give it away for free until people, and not only that, while you're giving it away for free, you're getting better. Like you should be constantly getting better. So by the time you release like your masterpiece, you could be like, yeah, like I'm going to charge now because you all know who I am.
Yeah. I've earned it, punks.
Yeah.
Yeah, like our Kickstarter, it's probably going to be done by the time this episode is out. But our comics for issues 1 and 2 of the comic that's on there right now, it's superhero, so you're not going to be like into it. Those are better than the original versions that we put out because we were learning during the entire process, and we're still learning, obviously. But in the beginning of all of this, of like joining the whole indie comic thing, I didn't know there were so many different jobs to make a comic book. I didn't know there was a colorist and a letterer and all that other stuff. And then I learned that. I didn't learn how to do it, but I paid other people to do it, and I just write. And nice. I'm just so happy with the first 2 issues that we have now that are going to come out to people because they're way better than what was originally put out. That's awesome.
That's great. And to look back and realize that, it's got to be really validating and gratifying and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's definitely, I think that like Greg was saying with our comic books, we also didn't wait though. Like we released our other comic already. Like we didn't wait until we got the perfect artist. We didn't wait until we got everything set. In fact, Greg didn't wait at all because at first he was paying an artist we don't even use anymore before we changed. The skater one. So basically our first rendition of our comic, maybe 3 people have seen, and they're the only people that'll ever see it. And then
cool.
And then we released our actual what is it? This one. Then we released our first edition of the Seer Chronicles, and then this one, while we were doing the second one, we were editing through it. We're damn, we need to redo the first one because of this, how good the second one's gonna be.
Oh yeah.
So
I've had that feeling before.
It was funny too because now the first one's gonna be like a real pilot episode where it's a little longer than a normal episode kind of thing. So we're pretty sure it's only gonna be 42 pages maybe. It's getting pretty close. We're almost done editing it, but it's getting there. It's long.
Yeah, I mean, knowing when to be done is one of the most important and hardest things to do, especially if you have true, I don't know, respect or appreciation or I guess concern for the quality of your craft. I think most creators are very, very, very concerned about, pleasing their contributors, or if you have a Kickstarter, the people who gave you money because they trusted you to put out quality content. And so that's a big concern, but it's at a certain point, you just got to be all right, this is good enough. Let's go. Move it out the door and go to the next project. But that can be really hard, especially for new people who've never done it before. It's terrifying. I remember the first time I did that to paying customers. I was like, oh man. And now it's it's kind of funny because a lot of people liked it. That was with Saint Six Catalyst back in 2015 or 14, or I don't even remember. But looking back on it now, I'm going oh God, the lettering was really bad and all these little things, these critiques. But I'm not depressed about it or anything because I just go, you know what? I just take those lessons and do it better next time. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So it's all good. The whole thing's a learning process. And as long as you got happy people reading your comic book and going, man, that was pretty cool, or getting feedback and getting something out of it, I think that's the main thing. You just don't want people to be pissed off and feel like they've been ripped off or something. Yeah. That's the one thing that you really want to avoid.
Well, it's funny because our latest our first comic, like people were like, oh man, that was like really cool. And then we're like, we almost feel bad that we're releasing the second one because it's gonna make that one look so bad. Like,
oh yeah,
it's just because not only do we have like a better artist, which like it's that whole thing, like the ingredients you start with make it better. So our colorist basically saved our first comic because our illustrator,
they can do that,
kind of like, you know, messed up a lot of stuff, and so he had to like basically fix it. And we were like, oh my God, like we're keeping this colorist forever now because of how amazingly well he was able to repair the damage done. And we didn't have time to like go back and fix the illustrations.
Far and away the most underappreciated role in creating a comic is the colorist. It's kind of like the soundtrack or like the sound design for a film. It's like, man, if someone does a really good job with that stuff, people usually won't notice, but if you get a bad colorist, your book is ruined.
That's like the letterer. That's like the letterer. Like,
yeah, it is a lot like the letterer is the same way. Yeah,
like the letterer.
Usually lettering even more so because like good lettering you don't notice because it blends with the artwork so well. But bad lettering you're just like, ugh, what is, you know, like you have a scorpion in your hands. You just gotta get it out of here. I can't even look at that.
I did the lettering on our first comic before we hired the letterer to completely fix that because it looked like garbage. It's so funny too because like there's people that kind of pointed out like some things wrong with the lettering, and it's like, yeah, you probably should have done this, probably should have done that. It wasn't too bad. And then we got the new one after our letterist got a hold of it, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what I was doing, but it wasn't that. Like that was it was like the simplest stuff too. But you're right. It's just like just like the colorist, like it's underappreciated, but like basically the illustrator has to make sure that, you know, the base is good, but the colorist is definitely what makes sure that you remember it too. Like it's the shimmer that's on there, the polish, and it's like, yeah, like the lighting in our newest comic, like just looking at light shining, it's like it's ridiculous because now that he has a better base to start off of, he's got so much more freedom to do things, and it's like he's got like grunge work on some of our walls, and like, oh my God, like it's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, coloring's fun. I'm actually working on something right now for the first time where I'm going to be coloring someone else's line work, and it's really interesting because I'm kind of looking at like there's a couple of things that we might want to fix up, and like I can do some of that, and having the experience of like knowing what goes into inking also helps. But like most of it is just kind of, all right, what can I do here? And it's pretty fun to come at it from that angle, and I'm going to end up making something that looks a lot different from what I normally do. So it's exciting to be in that position.
Do you use Photoshop for?
Yeah, I use Photoshop. I've messed around a little bit with Clip Studio, but I don't know. Photoshop, I've been using it for so long, it just feels like using an extension of my body at this point. So I just don't really feel that, and it's so powerful. I can do anything that I aspire to, or that I ever have aspired to, I should say, on Photoshop. I'm just like, can I put some splats here? Can I make a brush made out of a watercolor blob? Yes. You know, like whatever, I can do it. So you can even make animations, which I've been kind of getting into lately. So it's cool. Yeah, Photoshop is very, very powerful. But I don't know, what do you guys, or I don't even know what your roles are. So Greg, you're writing.
Yep.
Dylan, what are you doing?
So my only role in the comic now is like editor-in-chief. Like I make sure, I'm more like a director. Like I go through,
Okay.
All right, Greg, I know what you were trying to say, so we're gonna fix that.
Okay.
I basically
so you're the studio. You're the studio exec going, no, we need don't say cunt. We can't say that right now.
Oh no, I'm the one adding that.
Yeah. Oh, good.
No, but no, like there's certain things like Greg will have like a plot where like something will come here, and I'm like, why? He's like, well, because like the story, and I'm like, yeah, but why are they here? So like I take all this background to make sure that the story makes sense, where he kind of comes up with the entire plot line, and then I come up with the thing that makes it a story. Like it's kind of
sure. And it's even important just to have a second set of eyes just to see the forest through the trees. You know, when you spend so much time zoomed in on something working on details, it can be hard to step back and like see the whole painting as a body, which, you know, someone coming in immediately will kind of look at it and go, and you know, you guys know what I'm talking about, just to kind of get a more immediate view of the whole thing and just kind of read it as a consumer might see it. and what is confusing, what works, what doesn't, all that stuff. So yeah, it's good to have a team or some people you can count on for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then for the most part, before I started doing that, because I didn't do that for this first comic. I think the first comic I edited now will be the one we're releasing, issue 2, and then we if we get our stretch goal of 3,000, or when we get our stretch goal of 3,000,
there you go.
we'll have another comic that I edited, and then the first issue we're finishing editing, and that'll be released sometime later this year with all the other stuff we're releasing. But yeah, so but aside from that, the thing that I'm mostly responsible for is like the website. I built the platform that all of our comics are on, although right now I'm still rebuilding it because I basically broke it, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna make it better this time and clean it up and make it work a little smoother.
Well, that's a learning experience right there. That's for sure.
I literally had a client. I built his website. He wanted to, what was it? He had two domains linked to a host, but the issue is that the host had an SSL cert, which makes it like, so if someone gives you credit card information, it's protected. But the one that was the primary one isn't the one he wanted that on. He wanted it on the other. They had to switch it, and it ended up breaking all of the website. I couldn't transfer it over. And I said, screw it, I'll just rebuild the whole thing. I built it in half the time, and it looks twice as good.
That's awesome. Right on.
I always see things like that as an opportunity. I'm like, all right, I'm going to remember how I saw it, but because how I saw it's going to look better than how it was, and then I'm going to build it. And so that's what I did. And then because it had all the SSL stuff built into it, and it was the primary domain, I was able to quickly add WooCommerce and all the e-commerce features, and connected a merchant site, Printify, and got all that stuff done in like a day. And I was like, that was awesome.
That's one of those Bob Ross happy accident situations.
Oh, yeah, just happy accident.
Yeah, no mistakes.
Look, it's just a tree.
Just a beautiful tree.
Just put this body behind this bush over here.
We don't need to see that. Didn't see that, folks. Oh man.
And
I mean, God, making mistakes is just like a whole other conversation by itself. Like I've learned so much. You don't learn as much from success. Like you learn what works to a point, but you don't learn quite as much as when you screw something up and go, oh my God, and you kind of reverse engineer and go, how could I prevented this from happening? You kind of like, it causes you to look at some details that you sort of ignore or may look over before. It's just pretty, it's a really valuable experience.
Yeah.
Usually.
When we, made a few mistakes on the first issue, I was like, and then we fixed it, and I'm like, wow. This is way better. Like, what the fuck? Okay.
Yeah, like our first story too. Like we kept almost the entire story. I think there's only one thing that we switched.
And we added things that just made it better. There's like Easter eggs, which there's a previous episode that I recorded this weekend, and all I talked about basically was like Easter eggs. Like how awesome they are, and like when you put them in certain spots. Like there's a thing in our comics, our like whole comic universe, like there's gonna be this one thing that you're gonna keep seeing, and then like later on it becomes like the major thing, and you're like, what?
Yeah, and that's kind of like the one thing that Greg and I definitely love about this, like building this, is that we're very intentionally adding so much like additional things in here. Like we want this universe to be so complete. Like Greg's literally built a world map for our Earth, right? Like we have a city that's being 3D modeled for a game that we're developing, right? Like we have like all this stuff that we've like slowly integrated. So like there'll be so much backstory. Like in our issue that we're releasing with this, we're also releasing like 2 pages that'll actually have like a newspaper in it telling you what's going on around the city, like stuff that might not even directly be relevant, like it just, or it might not seem like it too. So like just little stuff like that.
I did something kind of like that with my first book. So the concept was that it's like the near future, and it takes place in this really this nasty desert fiction county in California called Cosa, and all of these people who are like criminal contractors go there because there's really lax law enforcement. It's kind of about the breakdown of like modern society. And so there was a lawyer who developed this app that people would use. It was pretty much like Uber, except you would use it whenever you wanted someone to commit a crime for you. So like if you wanted someone to get their ass kicked or to rob somebody, you do this. And I created this this ad that was apparently really convincing. And I put it as a page in the book. And when people first saw it, they were pissed off because they're like, wait, this has ads in it? I thought this was a graphic novel. I'm like, no, read it. It's like world building stuff. And so it's like, but yeah, I love doing, that's the kind of thing that makes your world feel alive though. It's like putting those things in that kind of like look like stuff that you would see out in the world. Like I love the idea of the map and the newspaper stuff. Like, yeah, that's the stuff that makes it breathe. And it's fun to come up with too. And it helps you build the world just for you as a developer.
The other thing we're doing for our world is we're doing these little campaigns asking people for company ideas.
Oh, that's awesome.
We already have, I think, 4 or 5 companies made that, like, right? I think, right? Something like that.
There's technically way more because, like, I did an alcoholic one, and there's just so many different names that people just shout out to me.
But I mean, like, ones that we officially have a CEO for and everything. So basically, whoever won like the choice, we're making them a character in our universe, and they're the CEO of the company that they made.
That's
right?
cool.
So like we have fast food restaurants, soft beverage, liquor, things like that. And we're gonna come up with tons of other ones. But we literally have billboards and like bus stop signs and things like that throughout our game that'll actually like be advertisements for them. And so it's cool. Like, yeah, it's definitely. And then one of the other little things, I think this is in the other comic we're releasing, though, if we get our or when we get our stretch goal, right? There's a comic in there that's like in the comic, like it's like in our comic. There's someone reading a comic, and that comic is somebody else's actual comic, like one of our like partners.
It's a meta comic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So like we want to be able to like share that and have these like interwoven worlds where we just like broadcast that stuff.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah, that kind of thing really adds a lot of texture. And yeah, it's kind of reminding me of Transmetropolitan or something. There's always weird stuff going around, but like I love Transmetropolitan because you look at just like a splash page of like a cityscape. And just looking around all the details tells you so much about how the society operates and like what's wrong with it. And like that's pretty much what that thing's all about. But like, oh man, that's a good one.
Yeah, like our skyline that's drawn in page 2 of our comic, the 3. Yeah, there's a skyline that's drawn on page 3 of our comic. That is actually the 3D rendition of our city's skyline.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Sent to our artist to draw. In fact, the original like panel, we actually still have it as a 3D rendition of it, just placed in there, so he could see like how we wanted it to look, and then he like drew it in.
Yeah, and then I was like, you don't have to keep drawing different angles of the skyline. It's gonna be the same skyline for the whole comic, so we could just keep copying that skyline anytime we need it.
Well, and then it becomes iconic too, so it's like everybody wins.
I could totally put it on a shirt and just be like,
yeah. Oh yeah, do like the straight line, like where it's just at the top of the skyline. Yeah, I love that stuff though. Just like building out, like just iconic stuff in a fake world. Like I love that. It's a place that you could totally escape into.
Yeah, I mean it's fun. It adds texture to the world. It's great branding. Like that it's all good. It's all good. You can't lose.
Yeah. So where could people like find you and Kevin and anyone else?
Kevin's most active on Facebook. That's Kevin Rodatelli. We also have I think Fubrak has, we've got a Facebook page. I'm pretty sure we have a working Instagram. We must have a Twitter. I don't know. Kevin deals with all the social media stuff. I hate social media, so I spend as little time on it as possible. It'll make you nuts. But Fubrak, that's Fubrak Studio, and you can find that on Instagram and Facebook for sure. And I'm just Rob Cannon on all that stuff. I got a Facebook page. I also have an Instagram. That's I think it's at Rob Cannon Design. And as you can see, I'm really on top of it with all this. And I post as often as I remember to. But so that's where you can find us. And and my portfolio is arcannon.design. Yeah. So if you want to check out my goings on and what I'm doing in the world of fine art, check out that URL right there. So
nice.
Sweet. Well, thanks for coming on, and I'm gonna stop recording here. And
all right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Great conversation, and maybe I'll talk to you again sometime.